The frost on the library windows had turned to ice by the time I realized no one was coming back for me. I was 14 years old, huddled in the children's section bathroom because it was the only room without motion sensor lights that would give away my presence. My phone had died 3 hours ago. The building had been locked for 4 hours. Outside, the January wind howled through the empty parking lot where my mother's car should have been. Should have been. Would never be. Because in my first life, I froze to death that night. I could still remember the cold seeping into my bones as I tried to break a window, the way my fingers had stopped responding, the slow descent into sleep that I'd known, even at 14, I wouldn't wake from. I remembered the janitor finding my body the next morning, my lips blue, my skin gray. I remembered, in that strange way the dying sometimes do, my mother's face when the police told her, not grief, inconvenience. I forgot, she'd said just that. I forgot. My sister Jessica had been in the car with her. Jessica, 17 and golden and cruel, who had looked my mother in the eye and said, "I told you we were supposed to pick her up." A lie. Jessica had been the one to tell Mom I'd said I'd walk home. Jessica had smiled at me that morning, a secret smile that I'd been too naive to read as the promise of violence it was. In my first life, they'd ruled it an accident. Tragic. The forgotten child. There had been a small funeral. Jessica had cried beautifully. Mom had stood dry-eyed and received casseroles. Dad, already moved out with his new wife, had shown up late and left early. No one had been punished. No one had even been blamed, really, except me, for not trying harder to get their attention, for not having a backup plan, for dying inconveniently. But that was my first life. This time, when I woke up on the morning of my 14th birthday, 6 months before that January night, I woke up with every memory intact. Every slight, every cruelty, every moment of casual neglect that had culminated in my death. I woke up with knowledge and rage and something else, something that felt like ice in my veins. I woke up with the absolute certainty that I would never let them kill me again. The memories had been disorienting at first. I was 14 again, small and thin and forgettable, but my mind was older. I'd lived to the moment of my death. I carried those 14 years plus that final night of cold. I knew things no 14-year-old should know, like how my mother would forget me, like how Jessica would orchestrate it, like exactly how long the human body could survive in sub-zero temperatures without heat. The first thing I did was test the memories. At breakfast, I watched Jessica butter her toast, and I said, "You're going to spill orange juice on your white sweater in exactly 10 seconds. She'd looked at me like I was insane. Then she'd reached for her glass, knocked it with her elbow, and watched in horror as pulp and juice cascaded down her chest. Mom had yelled at her for being clumsy. Jessica had stared at me with something cold in her eyes. I'd smiled. The second thing I did was start documenting everything. Every time Mom forgot to pick me up from school, which was twice a week on average. Every time Jessica accidentally ruined my homework, or deleted my projects, or told her friends I was a pathological liar. Every time Dad canceled our weekend visits, which was all of them after that first month. I had a journal, password protected on my laptop, where I wrote it all down with dates and times and witnesses. I didn't know what I'd use it for yet. I just knew I'd need proof. The third thing I did was start planning for January. Because here's what I understood that I hadn't understood in my first life. My family didn't forget me by accident. Jessica wanted me gone, wanted Mom's attention, wanted my small college fund that Dad had set up before the divorce, wanted the narrative of being an only child to her new wealthy stepfather-to-be. Mom was too self-absorbed to notice one daughter was systematically destroying the other. And Dad was too busy building his shiny new family to care about the daughter who reminded him of his failures. I was an inconvenience to be managed. And in my first life, they'd managed me right into a grave. This time, I'd manage them instead. I need to go back further to explain why my death had been so easy for them, why nobody had questioned it, why I'd been the kind of child who could be forgotten. I was born when Mom was 19 and already regretting the marriage. Dad was 21 and trying to finish college. I was unplanned, unwanted, and unforgiven for existing. They'd tried in their way for a few years. But by the time Jessica was born, planned, wanted, after they'd gotten stable and bought a house, I was already the practice child, the rough draft, the one they'd made mistakes on. Jessica was perfect. Blonde where I was mousy brown, outgoing where I was quiet, athletic where I was clumsy. She was everything they'd wanted, and I was everything they wanted to forget. The favoritism was casual at first. Jessica got new clothes. I got hand-me-downs from cousins. Jessica got birthday parties. I got a cake. Jessica got a car at 16. I was told I could walk. But it got worse after the divorce when I was 12. Dad left for a woman named Cheryl who already had 2 perfect children of her own. He was so busy being the father he'd always wanted to be to them that he forgot he'd already had a daughter. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then quarterly, then just Christmas and my birthday, if he remembered. Mom got bitter. And when you're a bitter woman with 2 daughters, you keep the one who makes you feel good and resent the one who reminds you of your failures. I looked like Dad. I had his eyes, his quiet nature, his way of disappearing into books. Jessica looked like Mom, acted like Mom, and reflected back all the glory Mom wanted to see. So I became invisible in my own home, not abused in the obvious ways that teachers would notice. Just forgotten. Overlooked. Left behind. In my first life, I'd internalized it, believed I deserved it, tried harder to be good, to be easy, to be forgettable so they wouldn't have a reason to actually hate me. In this life, with the memories of my death still fresh, I understood the truth. They'd hated me all along. I'd just been too young to see it. And Jessica had been the architect of it all. She'd cultivated Mom's resentment, encouraged Dad's distance, ensured that I had no allies. She'd done it subtly, brilliantly, the way only a beloved child can manipulate their parents. A word here about how I'd said something mean, a lie there about how I'd stolen something. A careful construction of me as the problem child, the troubled one, the one who was difficult and ungrateful. By the time she was 17 and I was 14, she'd built a narrative so complete that when I died, no one questioned it. Of course, the troubled younger sister had been forgotten. Of course, she hadn't called for a ride. Of course, it was just a tragic accident. Jessica had killed me as surely as if she'd locked the library doors herself. This time, I'd make sure everyone knew it. The autumn months passed in careful preparation. I was a model student, quiet and studious, exactly as I'd been in my first life. I didn't fight back when Jessica sabotaged my science project, though I had a backup copy saved in 3 locations. I didn't complain when Mom forgot my parent-teacher conferences, though I documented every missed appointment. I didn't cry when Dad canceled Thanksgiving, though I recorded his voicemail making promises he wouldn't keep. I was building a case, brick by brick, but I was also building something else. Independence. I got a job at the local coffee shop, lying about my age, working weekend mornings when Mom slept in and Jessica was at volleyball practice. I saved every penny in an account they didn't know about, set up with the help of my maternal grandmother, the only family member who'd ever been kind to me, and who'd died of a heart attack 2 months after my death in the first timeline. Grandma Rose was my secret weapon. In my first life, I'd been too shy to reach out to her, too indoctrinated by Mom's complaints about her interfering mother to seek help. This time, I'd called her in September, asked to meet for coffee, and told her a carefully edited version of the truth. Mom forgets me sometimes, I'd said, stirring sugar into hot chocolate I didn't want. I just want to have some emergency money, in case. Grandma Rose had looked at me with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She was 72, tiny and fierce, and she'd never forgiven my mother for turning out cruel. In case of what, specifically? In case she forgets me somewhere, and I need a cab. The look on Grandma's face had been volcanic, but she'd simply nodded, pulled out her checkbook, and written me a check for $5,000. "This is for emergencies," she'd said, "and your mother doesn't need to know about it. I'll help you set up an account." She'd also given me her credit card. "For real emergencies only," she'd warned. "And Sarah, if you need more than money, you call me. Day or night." I'd hugged her, this woman who would die of grief and stress in 2 months if I didn't change things, and I'd promised I would. That promise had been the start of my second plan, because if I was going to survive this life, I needed to make sure the people I loved survived too. November came with the first snow, Jessica was preparing for early college applications, her sights set on Stanford, where she'd been guaranteed acceptance thanks to her perfect grades, half of them stolen from me, her athletic achievements, funded entirely by mom and dad while I wore shoes with holes, and her heartwarming essay about overcoming the tragedy of her troubled younger sister. I'd read that essay in my first life after I'd died. They'd framed it and put it in the living room. The sister I couldn't save, Jessica had written. Despite my best efforts to help her, she pushed everyone away. I'll carry that guilt forever. The essay had helped her get a full scholarship. It had made her a minor celebrity in our town. It had been built on my corpse, and it had launched her into a life of success while I'd rotted in the ground. This time, I was going to make sure that essay never got written, or if it did, that everyone knew it for the lie it was. I started with the small things. When Jessica left her laptop open, which she always did because she'd never seen me as a threat, I installed a keylogger. Simple software, invisible, that recorded every keystroke, every paper she plagiarized from me, every cruel message she sent to her friends about me, every search term about how to get rid of unwanted siblings. Yes, she'd actually searched that multiple times, along with how to make someone look mentally unstable, how to turn parents against a child, and most damningly, how long does hypothermia take? That last search had been dated November 15th, 2024. 6 weeks before that January night, she'd been planning it, actively, deliberately planning it. The rage I felt when I saw that search history was cold and clarifying. In my first life, I thought maybe it really had been an accident, a terrible coincidence. But no, Jessica had been setting the stage for my death, and that night at the library had been her opportunity. Well, this time, I'd set a different stage. December brought Grandma Rose's heart attack. I'd been ready for it, had researched the warning signs, had made sure she had her medications. But on December 10th, she'd called me, her voice thin and strained. "Sarah, honey, I don't feel well. I just thought I'd already been on my way to her house. I visited twice a week now, had made it a routine." I found her clutching her chest, her face gray. I called 911, administered the aspirin I'd learned to carry, held her hand in the ambulance. She survived. Barely. The doctor said if I'd been even 10 minutes later, she would have died. "You saved my life," she'd whispered in the hospital, her hand squeezing mine. "How did you know?" "I just had a feeling," I'd lied. "You're all I have, Grandma. I couldn't lose you." She'd cried then, and made me promise that after she recovered, I'd come live with her. "No more living with that woman," she'd said. "I should have fought for custody years ago." But I'd shaken my head. "Not yet," I'd said. "Soon, I promise. But not yet." Because I needed to be in that house for January. I needed to be the child they forgot. One last time. The week before winter break, Jessica's plotting intensified. I could see it in the way she watched me, calculating. She'd been accepted to Stanford early admission. She had everything she'd wanted. Except she still had a little sister who existed, who might someday tell stories, who might ruin her perfect narrative. She started telling Mom I was acting weird, started suggesting I was mentally unstable, started building the story that would explain why I might do something drastic, something dangerous, something that looked like my own fault. Mom, exhausted from double shifts at the hospital and dates with her new boyfriend, barely listened. But the seeds were planted. On December 20th, the library announced extended hours for exam week, open until 10 p.m. every night for students who needed quiet study space. I watched Jessica's eyes light up when she saw the notice, watched her mind work, watched her smile. She was going to do it during exam week, during the coldest week of winter when temperatures dropped below zero at night. Perfect. I was counting on it. January 15th, the day of my death in my first life. I woke up that morning with crystal clarity. Today was the day Jessica would forget me. Today was the day Mom would drive away. Today was the day I was supposed to die. Instead, today was the day I'd destroy them both. I dressed carefully, thermal underwear hidden beneath my school clothes, a thin GPS tracker sewn into my jacket lining, purchased with Grandma's emergency card, my phone fully charged with a portable battery pack in my backpack. I looked exactly as I had in my first life. Small, cold, unprepared for winter. Forgettable. But I was anything but. At breakfast, Jessica was saccharine sweet. Mom, don't forget Sarah has to stay late at the library tonight for her exam tomorrow. She'll need a ride at 10. Mom nodded absently, scrolling through her phone. Sure, honey. I can text you when I'm done, I offered, playing my part. Since exam times vary. That's fine, Mom said, not looking up. Jessica smiled at me, that same smile from my first life, the promise of violence. I smiled back. This time, I understood what that smile meant. This time, I was ready. School passed in a blur. I aced my morning exams. I'd already taken them once, after all, already knew the answers. At lunch, I saw Jessica whispering to Mom in the parking lot. Saw Mom nod, distracted. Saw Jessica point to her phone. She was deleting Mom's reminder. I knew, because in my first life, Mom had sworn she'd set a reminder. Had shown the police her phone, confused about where it went. Jessica had deleted it. And this time, I watched her do it. I took a photo from across the parking lot. The angle was perfect. Jessica's face visible, Mom's phone clearly in Jessica's hand, the timestamp clear. Evidence, always evidence. After school, I went to the library, set up in my usual spot, studied genuinely for my remaining exams. I might know the material, but I wasn't taking chances. At 6 p.m., I texted Mom. Still studying, probably until close. She didn't respond. She never did. At 8 p.m., I texted again. Almost done. Can you pick me up at 10? No response. At 9 p.m., I texted, Mom, are you getting these? Nothing. At 9:45, I packed my bag, went to the bathroom, and waited. Heard the librarian call out the 15-minute warning. Heard the building empty. Heard the front doors lock. I was alone in the building, just like last time. Except this time, I had a plan. I waited in the bathroom for 30 minutes, letting them think I was really trapped. Then I pulled out my phone, fully charged, unlike last time, and made my first call. Not to Mom, not to Dad, not even to Grandma Rose, though she was on standby. I called 911. Hi, I'm really sorry to bother you, I said, letting my voice shake exactly enough. I'm locked in the public library. They closed at 10 and I was in the bathroom and I think everyone forgot about me. I can't get out and it's really cold and I don't know what to do. The dispatcher was immediately concerned. What's your name, honey? How old are you? Sarah Mitchell. I'm 14. My mom was supposed to pick me up, but she's not answering her phone. Okay, Sarah, stay calm. We're sending someone right now. Can you stay on the line with me? Yes, thank you. I'm really cold. I know, sweetie. Help is coming. Have you tried calling your mother? Yes, ma'am. 3 times. And my sister. Neither of them are answering. There it was, on a recorded 911 line, time-stamped, official. The police were being dispatched not just to rescue me, but to document that my family had abandoned me. 20 minutes later, I heard sirens, saw lights through the library windows. The janitor arrived to unlock the building, and suddenly there were police officers and paramedics wrapping me in blankets, checking me for hypothermia, asking questions. Your mother was supposed to pick you up? Yes, sir, at 10 she said she would. And you texted her? Yes, sir, 3 times. And I texted my sister, too. Neither of them responded. The officer's face hardened. Where do you live? We'll take you home and have a conversation with your mother. Thank you, I whispered. I was really scared. And I had been. Even knowing I had a plan, even having my phone and my GPS tracker and my secret resources, being locked in that library had brought back the visceral terror of my first death. The fear was real. The vulnerability was real. The only difference was that this time I wasn't helpless. The police drove me home at 11:30 p.m. The house was dark. Mom's car was in the driveway. They'd been home. For over an hour, they'd been home, and neither of them had noticed I was missing. The officer knocked on the door. Hard. It took 5 minutes of pounding before a light came on. Mom answered in her bathrobe, her face annoyed until she saw the police car. Mrs. Mitchell? We have your daughter Sarah here. She was locked in the library overnight. She says she texted you multiple times asking for a ride? Mom's face went through several emotions. confusion, annoyance, calculation, and finally, false concern. "Oh my God, Sarah, I'm so sorry, honey. I didn't get your texts. My phone must have been on silent." The officer wasn't buying it. "Ma'am, she texted you at 8, 9, and 9:45 p.m. You didn't check your phone for over 3 hours?" I was I was watching TV. I lost track of time. Where's her sister? Jessica was supposed to remind me. On cue, Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs, her face perfectly arranged in fake horror. "Oh my God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I thought you said you'd walk home. I told Mom we didn't need to pick you up." There it was, the lie from my first life deployed right on schedule. Except this time, I had proof. "That's interesting," I said quietly. "Because I have all the texts I sent. Would you like to see them, officer?" The officer nodded. I pulled out my phone and showed him the entire conversation. Time stamps clear, messages delivered, read receipts showing both Mom and Jessica had read them. "Mrs. Mitchell," the officer said slowly, "these messages show as read at 9:47 p.m. That means someone opened them." Mom's face went pale. Jessica's eyes narrowed. "And Jessica," I continued, my voice steady, "you texted me at 9 saying good luck studying. So you knew I was at the library. You knew I needed a ride, but you told Mom I was walking?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. The officer looked between us, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come down to the station tomorrow to make a statement. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, is it?" "What do you mean?" Mom's voice was shrill. "I mean," the officer said, pulling out his notepad, "that I'm going to need to file a report about child endangerment. Your 14-year-old daughter was locked in a building overnight in sub-zero temperatures because neither you nor her sister bothered to pick her up or check your phones. That's neglect, Mrs. Mitchell. It was an accident. An accident that could have killed her." The officer turned to me. "Sarah, do you feel safe here tonight?" This was my moment, the fulcrum on which everything would turn. "I'd like to call my grandmother," I said quietly. "If that's okay." Grandma Rose arrived like a hurricane in a housecoat. She swept into the house, took one look at Mom's face and Jessica's calculated innocence, and turned to the police officer with steel in her voice. "I want custody," she said. Immediately, emergency custody. This is not the first time my daughter has neglected Sarah." "Grandma, that's not—" Mom started. "Shut up, Margaret." Grandma Rose had never used that tone with her daughter before. The room went silent. "You forgot your child. You left her to die in a locked building. Don't you dare tell me this is the first time." She turned to me. "Sarah, honey, get your things. You're coming home with me, officer. What do we need to do to make this official?" The officer looked relieved to have an adult who actually cared. "I'll file the report tonight. Given the circumstances and the child's age, she can stay with you while CPS investigates. Mrs. Mitchell, you'll be hearing from them tomorrow." "This is insane," Mom's voice cracked. "It was one mistake." "Show him," Grandma Rose said to me. "Show him the journal." I'd given Grandma Rose access to my documented evidence 3 days ago, had asked her to keep it safe, had known this moment was coming. I pulled out my laptop, opened the password-protected file, and handed it to the officer. I've been documenting every time Mom forgot to pick me up from school, every time she missed a parent-teacher conference, every time she forgot to feed me or buy me clothes or take me to the doctor. It's all there. Dates, times, witnesses. The officer scrolled through pages of documentation. His face grew darker with each entry. "Mrs. Mitchell, you need to call a lawyer." I left that night with Grandma Rose, my room packed into garbage bags because I'd never had a proper suitcase. As we drove away, I looked back at the house, saw Jessica in the window, her face twisted with rage. She'd tried to kill me, and I'd turned it into her destruction, but I wasn't done, not even close. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of CPS investigations, police interviews, and media attention. Because here's what I hadn't anticipated. In a small town, the story of a 14-year-old nearly freezing to death because her mother and sister forgot her made the local news. And the local news found my journal. Suddenly, I was the forgotten girl. My documentation became evidence not just of neglect, but of systematic abuse. The interviews with teachers who remembered Mom missing every conference. The testimonies of friends' parents who'd given me rides home dozens of times. The school records showing I'd been on the free lunch program because Mom forgot to send money, despite making a comfortable salary as a nurse. Jessica's college applications were put on hold pending the investigation. Stanford sent a letter requesting clarification about the family situation. Her essay about her troubled sister looked very different in the context of documented abuse. Mom lost her job when the hospital received complaints about her judgment. If she couldn't remember her own child, how could she be trusted with patients? Dad predictably tried to stay out of it until Grandma Rose's lawyer served him with papers for back child support. Turned out he'd been paying Mom for one child, but she'd been claiming both of us on her taxes. Fraud. The IRS got involved. Everything I'd built, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every documented moment of neglect, it all came cascading down on them like an avalanche. But I still wasn't satisfied, because Jessica hadn't just neglected me. She'd actively plotted to kill me, and I was going to prove it. The keylogger data was my nuclear option. I'd been saving it, letting it accumulate. Months of Jessica's digital life, every conversation, every search, every document, including her search history about hypothermia, including the deleted reminder on Mom's phone, including messages to her friends about how much easier her life would be without a little sister. Most damningly, including a document she'd started writing, a diary entry dated for after January 15th, never finished, that began an, "I can't believe it actually worked. She's gone and everyone thinks it was just a tragic accident. I'm finally free." She'd written it in advance, had planned to write it after I'd died to process her feelings, to congratulate herself. The document had never been deleted, just saved to a hidden folder, waiting. I gave it all to the police. Not immediately. I waited until the neglect case was solid, until Mom and Jessica were already buried in investigations. Then I provided the digital evidence that turned neglect into something much darker. The police arrested Jessica on March 1st, attempted murder, conspiracy, child endangerment. She was 17, but they charged her as an adult. The evidence was too damning, too premeditated. The prosecutor built a case around that search history, those messages, that pre-written diary entry. "Your sister planned to kill you," the detective told me, matter of fact. "If you hadn't called 911, if you hadn't documented everything, if you'd just been a normal scared kid, you'd be dead. And she'd be at Stanford right now." I knew, God, I knew, because in my first life, that's exactly what had happened. The trial was in June. I had to testify, had to sit in front of a courtroom and explain why I'd been documenting my own abuse at 14. Had to watch Jessica's lawyer try to paint me as a paranoid, disturbed child who'd fabricated everything. But the evidence didn't lie. The texts were real. The search history was real. The pre-written diary entry was real. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, found her guilty on all counts. Jessica was sentenced to 15 years in prison. She'd be 32 when she got out. Her Stanford acceptance was revoked. Her perfect life was gone. Mom wasn't charged criminally. The prosecutor said there wasn't enough evidence that she'd known about Jessica's plan, but she lost custody of me permanently. Lost her nursing license. Lost her house when she couldn't make payments without her job. Dad lost the child support case and had to pay back 7 years of unpaid support plus penalties. His new family left him when the financial strain became too much. He reached out to me once asking if I could help him out since I was living with Grandma Rose now. I told him to lose my number. By the time school started in September, I was a different person. Still 14, still small, still quiet, but no longer forgotten. Grandma Rose had officially adopted me, had sold her small house and bought a bigger one where I had my own room, painted blue like I'd always wanted, had enrolled me in private school where teachers actually noticed their students. The settlement from CPS, because the system had failed me too, all those years of missed signs, went into a trust fund. For college, for my future, for the life I'd fought to have. I made friends, real friends who liked me for me, not because they felt sorry for the troubled girl. I joined the debate team, got straight A's because I didn't have to share a computer or hide my work or worry about Jessica sabotaging me. I thrived. And every time I passed a library, every time the weather turned cold, I thought about the night I died in my first life, the night I almost died in this one, the night that had been my rebirth instead of my death. 3 years passed. I was 17, applying to colleges, thinking about my future. Stanford sent me a recruitment letter. Apparently, my debate team awards had caught their attention. I threw it away. I didn't want anything Jessica had wanted. I chose Brown instead. East Coast, far from California, far from the memories. Jessica had been in prison for 3 years. I'd never visited, never written, never thought about her except when I had to, when the nightmares came. But on my 17th birthday, I received a letter from her. The prison had allowed her to mail it despite my request for no contact. I almost threw it away unread, but something made me open it. Dear Sarah, I know you won't forgive me. I don't expect you to. I don't deserve forgiveness. I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did, what I tried to do. The therapist here says I was jealous, that I saw you as competition, that I was so desperate to be the only child that I convinced myself getting rid of you was justified. She's right. But it's more than that. I was jealous because you were better than me at everything that mattered. You were kind. You were smart in the real way, not just the grade-getting way. You were genuine, and I hated you for it because I knew I was fake. I knew Mom liked me better only because I manipulated her. I knew my achievements were half stolen from you. I knew my perfect life was built on your suffering, and instead of being better, I tried to destroy you. I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you won. You deserved to win. I hope you have a beautiful life, Sarah. I hope you forget I ever existed. I hope you're free. Jessica, I read the letter twice. Felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no forgiveness. She'd tried to kill me. Had succeeded in one life and nearly succeeded in another. Her remorse didn't change that, didn't undo the years of torment, didn't bring back the innocence I'd lost. I burned the letter in Grandma Rose's fireplace, watched the paper curl and blacken, watched Jessica's words turn to ash. Then I went back to my college applications and never thought about her again. 4 years after that January night, I graduated from Brown with honors, degree in psychology with a focus on family trauma. Because I understood now that my story wasn't unique, there were thousands of forgotten children, overlooked daughters, scapegoated siblings. I wanted to help them, wanted to make sure no other child had to die to be noticed. Grandma Rose came to my graduation, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Your mother should be here. Your father should be here." "You're here," I said, hugging her tight. "That's all that matters." She'd given me everything. Not just a home and stability, but belief. She'd believed me when I'd told her I was being neglected, had acted immediately, had fought for me with everything she had. She'd saved my life as surely as I'd saved hers. After graduation, I started a nonprofit, the Remembered Child Project. We provided resources for forgotten kids, the ones who slipped through the cracks, who were overlooked, who needed someone to see them. We partnered with schools to identify at-risk children, provided emergency phones and hotlines, trained teachers to spot the signs of systematic neglect, gave kids the tools to document their own abuse just like I had. The first year, we helped 63 children. The second year, over 200. Every child we saved felt like redemption. Every family we held accountable felt like justice. I was 25 when I gave my first TED Talk about childhood neglect. The video went viral. Suddenly, I was being interviewed on news shows, invited to speak at conferences, asked to consult on child welfare policy. "The Forgotten Girl Speaks," the headline said. "From nearly freezing to death to fighting for forgotten children." I hated the headlines, but I used the platform. Because for every child like me who got a second chance, there were hundreds who didn't, who died in locked buildings or abusive homes or simple, tragic neglect. I couldn't save them all, but I could try. On the 10-year anniversary of the night I was locked in the library, I visited it for the first time since. The building had been renovated. New safety systems, procedures to check all rooms before locking up, a policy that required librarians to confirm rides for minors. They'd named the new children's section after me, the Sarah Mitchell Reading Room. There was a plaque, in honor of Sarah Mitchell, who survived the unsurvivable and dedicated her life to ensuring no child is forgotten. I stood in front of it, remembering. The cold, the fear. The moment I'd realized no one was coming. The moment I'd decided to save myself. "You okay?" Grandma Rose was beside me, older now, but still fierce, still my champion. I'm okay, I said, and meant it, because I'd done more than survive. I'd won, not just against Jessica and Mom and Dad and everyone who'd forgotten me. I'd won against the odds, against the universe that had killed me once. I'd come back from death itself and built a life worth living. Last year I got married, to someone kind, someone who saw me, someone who would never forget me. We have a daughter now. Her name is Rose, after the woman who saved me. Rose will never be forgotten, will never be overlooked, will never have to fight to be seen. She'll know, from the moment she's born, that she matters, that she's valued, that she's loved. That's my revenge in the end. Not just destroying the people who tried to kill me, not just building a nonprofit, or giving speeches or changing policies. My revenge is living, thriving, being happy. My revenge is becoming everything they said I'd never be. Jessica gets out of prison next year. She'll be 32, exactly as predicted. No college degree, no career, no perfect life. Just a prison record and the knowledge that she threw away everything for jealousy. I won't be there when she's released. Won't send a letter or make contact. I truly have forgotten her in all the ways that matter. But sometimes I imagine her, Googling my name, finding my nonprofit, and my TED Talk, and my life, seeing everything I've built, everything she tried to take from me. I imagine her understanding that she didn't just fail to kill me. She made me stronger. She made me fight. She made me into someone who saves other forgotten children, who speaks for the voiceless, who remembers the overlooked. Every child I save is a repudiation of what she tried to do. Every life I change is proof that she failed, and that, more than any prison sentence, is the justice I needed. Mom tried to reach out once, 3 years ago. A long email about how she'd been in therapy, how she understood now what she'd done wrong, how she wanted to rebuild our relationship. I read it once, deleted it, never responded. Because here's the thing about being forgotten. You learn who actually cares. Grandma Rose had always cared, had fought for me from the moment she understood what was happening, had never needed me to nearly die to pay attention. Mom had needed a police investigation, a CPS case, and media attention to realize she had a daughter. That wasn't love, that was guilt. And I didn't owe her absolution. Dad never reached out at all. Last I heard, he was working a retail job, divorced again, living alone. He'd lost everything and gained nothing. Exactly what he deserved. I don't hate them anymore. Hate requires energy, attention, care. I have none of those to spare for people who never spared any for me. I simply don't think about them. They're forgotten, just like they forgot me. Today is January 15th, the anniversary. I'm 24 now, 10 years past the night I died in one life and survived in another. I'm standing in the library where it happened, in the reading room named after me, with my daughter sleeping against my chest and my grandmother beside me and my husband holding my hand. I'm surrounded by people who see me, who remember me, who love me. I think about the girl I was in that first life, 14 and cold and dying, believing she deserved to be forgotten, believing she wasn't worth remembering. I wish I could tell her that she was wrong, that she mattered, that she would survive. But I can't tell her that. She's dead. She died in this building 10 years ago, believing the lie that she was forgettable. I'm not her. I'm who she became when she got a second chance, when she fought back, when she refused to be forgotten ever again. I'm Sarah Mitchell, the forgotten girl who refused to stay forgotten. And I won. Every single day I won. They left me at the library overnight. After Rebirth, I never asked them for rides because I learned to drive myself, and I drove myself all the way to freedom.